Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. Appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Coming up, we are headed to court, ladies and gentlemen. Breaking news out of Florida, where a school is challenging a requirement that milk be served to students. It is indeed a first-of-its-kind legal action, citing significant concerns posed by the dangers of dairy. Attorney Mark Kennedy is here to help explain it all to us. Mark, we'll look forward to chatting with you momentarily. Plus, we're going to be taking it from the courtroom to the doctor's office. Oh, my goodness gracious, my camera just went bye-bye. But that's okay. Dr. Vanita Rahman, she is here. She's going to be taking a closer look at the health risk faced by children who do in fact consume a lot of dairy. Oh, there's a camera. Hi, good to see you again. Dr. Rahman, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time. We'll be catching up with you in just a moment. And if you have a question that you would like for the doctor to answer, go ahead, post that in the comments section now, or you can tweet that to us using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. We will be opening up the doctor's mailbag in just a little bit. But first, let's get caught up on the latest happenings. Here are your health headlines for Thursday, October 29th, 2020. And we do begin with a look at the coronavirus, where more than 80,000 new cases and nearly 1,000 deaths were reported Wednesday. This just the third time the U.S. has crossed that 80,000 case threshold, each instance coming during the latest wave of infections over the recent weeks. And there are no signs that the spread will be slowing anytime soon. The total number of cases now at 8.8 million in the U.S., with at least 227,000 lives lost. Sticking with COVID here, bear with me. Boy, it's one of those days. A study of more than 30,000 patients find those who had only mild to moderate symptoms retain an antibody response to the virus for up to 5 months. Researchers say it's not yet definitive that those people are in fact immune from reinfection during that time, but they do believe that the antibodies will decrease the odds of a second bout with the virus. Previous studies have shown COVID-19 antibodies only last for 2 to 3 months. And finally, today, another antibody study has scientists really talking, but this one is much different. So bear with me here. What you are looking at right there, that is a cheeseburger, and that is potentially one of the least healthy foods known to man. And that is important to note because an international team of researchers say they have identified a link between meat and dairy diets and an antibody that increases the risk of cancer. The group says the findings of a 120-person study may help explain why those who eat large amounts of dairy and red meat have higher incidence of cancer compared to those who eat other diets. The group says the body's immune response to the new 5-GC sugar molecule found in the tissues of mammals is the culprit in this case. More research is needed. All right, so let's stay on dairy here because that is going to be our theme of the day. A school in Florida making history, taking first of its kind legal action, challenging the National School Lunch Program's mandate that milk be offered to all students. The requirement comes despite high rates of lactose intolerance and an abundance of research showing that milk does not, in fact, do a body good. It is the leading source of saturated fat in children's diets at a time when nearly 1 out of every 5 children are obese. To help us walk through this case is our Vice President of Legal Affairs, Mark Kennedy. Mark, thanks so much for taking the time, my friend.
Glad to be here. Good to see you.
Great to see you. And this really is first of its kind legal action here. Walk us through this case. What exactly is the school asking for here?
Well, this is a Florida charter school. It's getting started, and as part of the application process, it had to demonstrate to its school district that it could function. And this is a very particular, special school in that its mission is going to involve educating its students about real-world issues, the environment, nutrition, and they want to have a plant-based lunch line. And one of the issues that came up when they were applying was, well, how could you do this? The National School Lunch Program requires milk, as you said. And what the school did was they wrote to the agency in Florida that does the work of the USDA in carrying out the National School Lunch Program there. I said, look, here's our plan. We will have a lunch line, and we will have milk as you require, but it'll be at the end. And instead of putting a carton on every kid's plate, there will be cups. And if those children are interested in the milk as they are required to be offered by the program, they could pour it and walk off. But if they don't want it, they don't have to have it. And of course, there'd be water and maybe other beverages around. And in addition to that, the school proposed, by the way, our educational curriculum involves nutrition education. And we are a modern school talking about real world issues. People should be eating a plant-based diet for all kinds of reasons related to personal health and, of course, the health of the planet and animals. And so as part of that program, the school proposed to have educational material on the walls and brochures in the classroom as part of the curriculum, and even things that would be there near the lunch line, talking about how milk and dairy products are actually bad for them. It's all First Amendment stuff if you're an educator, especially if you're part of a unique program like a charter school, which is supposed to have an innovative approach to to education. And so sent this letter off. And the agency said, oh, no. Did you know that there is a part of the National School Lunch Act that says that a school may not do anything that indirectly or directly would interfere with the marketing of milk? So your whole curriculum, anytime you talk about dairy in a bad way, could indirectly affect or directly affect the sale of the milk products in the lunch line. And so you can't do that. You can't. And by the way, you can't serve children the milk as the last item in the line that they would pour into cups if the milk might spill. And this was literally the agency's response. And it's crazy. So, of course, the school has appealed. And this is a real twist in Florida law. You interact with the agency and you appeal, and it goes right into court. And not only does it go into court, but it goes into the Court of Appeals, the middle level court in Florida. So we're looking at a court that has the chance to affect a lot of Florida in a meaningful way. And so we've raised issues in the lawsuit. I say loosely because the Physicians Committee is sponsoring the lawsuit, but we're not actually the attorneys in the case. We've been sort of feeding all of our expertise and knowledge to the school and the law firm that's working on the case. And we've been working with the school for 2 years on sort of setting up this program. And one of the arguments that we're making is, of course, the school should have the flexibility and the discretion to teach its students this way, to set up its national school lunch program participation in this way, because its students will need that. I mean, Chuck, you didn't go into the statistics, but the NIH will tell you, you go right to the website and you can see the rates of lactose intolerance among children of color. It's very high, maybe reaching up to 90% for some student groups. And what you also have in Pinellas County, which is where the school will be located, is about 25% of the population is people of color. So we're talking about a large student base that could be affected by lactose intolerance, which is the inability to process the sugar that's just omnipresent and rampant in milk. So if you drink milk and you're lactose intolerant, you become sick. I mean, you're going to have stomach ache, pain, all kinds of abdominal discomfort. And the numbers that I mentioned, 95% of Asians, 60 to 80% of Blacks, and a certain portion of Jews, 80 to 100% of Native Americans, 50 to 80% of Latinos. So we're talking about a lot of people who might suffer from lactose intolerance, not to mention the other things you said, high saturated fat, and of course, lactose, sugar. And studies show milk doesn't really help with bone health. So we said all these things. And we also said, of course, in addition to the health concerns and the requirement that students take this milk, it's just absurd. So the school is appealing. Now I've just gone on and on and on. Maybe you have a question. I probably missed a couple of details. Let me say, I know I missed one detail, which is that the school lunch program by statute says that if you want something other than dairy milk in your lunch, you have 2 ways you can do it. If you don't have what's called a disability under the law, you are allowed to submit a letter that you got either from your parent or a medical professional saying, I need something other than milk. If you're in that category, the school can say no. On the other hand, if you have a disability recognized by the USDA and federal laws relating to disabilities, you are entitled to a substitute for what's called fluid milk, but you have to go to a physician for that. And it's been expanded to people who can write prescriptions, so it would include nurse practitioners, but that's the law. So if you are at a school other than this one we're talking about, you're going to have a really hard time having people who understand your need. And you also, wherever you are, would have to go to the doctor. We're talking about, you have to take the time off. Your parents have to take you to the doctor, pay for that visit, find a doctor who really understands how lactose intolerance affects children of color, or anyone else for that matter. About 2% of people of Northern European descent are also lactose intolerant. And get this note, take it back to your school, and then say, but I would like something other than milk, and I'm entitled to it. That's the only way you could guarantee a drink other than milk in your lunch.
That's a lot of hoops to jump through just to get a glass of water, for goodness sakes. I've been told, and I think common sense also tells you in this lifetime, if you want to get to the bottom of something, follow the money. And one of the things that the legal brief points out also is that there's a financial component to this. I know that some of the research that we've done here at the Physicians Committee really points this out, and there is a lot of money on the line here. So talk to us about the financial makeup of what's happening here, particularly given the fact that we've seen slumping milk sales recently in grocery stores. So I would imagine then that the dairy industry is very heavily relying on the dollars that would be coming in from the schools.
That's right. So there's sort of two financial aspects. One is that if you're a school, you benefit greatly. This is a federal benefit. For every meal you sell that meets the requirements, and it's like 5 components of food: one is fruit, one is vegetable, one is grain, and so on. For every sale of a meal, you are reimbursed a certain amount. And then there are categories of amounts based on who ate the meal. So if it was a low-income student, the school will be reimbursed more because the school had to sell the meal for a lower cost. And then in some cases, the school will need to offer a free meal, in which case its reimbursement is higher, and so on. And then it's also regionally specific. So if you're a school in Alaska, you're going to get higher reimbursements because the food is shipped out there. So a school stands to have a lot of income from this program. So if you want to say to a school, well, if you don't want the shackles of this program, don't participate. Well, that's not really a financial option for a lot of schools. Especially public schools, because they're not going to be able to charge tuition. If you're a private school, you could say, do what you want. You can charge the parents and pay for the meals that you want to serve the students. So it's a very different situation. And then, as you note, on the other side of the wall, the milk industry gets, about 7.6% of its sales are funneled through this program. And it's by statute, so it kind of has to happen. They have this eternal grant to just pour the food into the school lunch system. And a couple of years ago, I was watching some program on nutrition, and that was something a dietitian literally said, was that milk is a fast way to get calories into kids' bodies. It's like, that sounds kind of gross, especially when we're talking about something with saturated fat, cholesterol, milk sugars, whatever. It should be about nutrition and not an efficient meal program. And so they tapped into the milk industry, and it's locked in. And that's where that part of the rule I mentioned that says that you can't indirectly or directly interfere with milk sales, that was born of slumping sales and disinterest in milk about 15 years ago. In part, at the time when it was passed, it was so that schools couldn't make exclusive contracts with other beverage vendors. So you wouldn't, under the school program, you wouldn't want to lose your focus on milk by allowing, this is, the government's thinking, by allowing, say, a juice vendor to have a deal with that school. So they said, get out. And what the USDA has done is taken that statute, that little provision, and just blown it up, saying not only can you not have exclusive contracts with other types of beverage vendors, but you have to be careful where you position milk. So there's this, and you mentioned water a few minutes ago, there is a policy that USDA updates every few years telling schools exactly where water can go. And, the 2018 edition of this rule was crazy because it talked about even pitchers of water and water fountains in the cafeteria, and how you wouldn't want the students to accidentally see that first and go and get a sip of water.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
maybe it would interfere with their interest in the milk when they got to the line.
That's a real thing that you're just saying. It's
a real thing.
Wow.
And there's a newer variant of that rule that's a little less absurd. But of course, now you see in this case that they've taken the contract restriction, then expanded it to where water can be. And now they're saying, and by the way, this affects your entire curriculum too. You can't in the classroom talk about bad things about milk, true things, by the way, if that might put an idea in a kid's head when they're in line at the lunch room.
We're going to be talking about some of those things that are taboo to talk about here in just a minute with Dr. Vanita Rahman, but we still have about 1 minute left with you. So what is the timeline for this moving forward, and what are the potential ramifications for this case as it winds its way through the legal system? I would imagine that there are other school districts, not just in Florida, but throughout the country, who would have a keen interest in this. Especially we see a growing appetite for plant-based meals. You look at New York City in particular, they already have Meatless Monday. So this, to me, I would think could have big time implications for what this means with dairy and school lunches moving forward.
Absolutely. It's a first of its kind lawsuit. So its effect is, it'll be it'll kind of shake things up, get a lot of attention. And as I said, it's starting at the appellate level in Florida. So it'll affect a larger part of Florida than it would if it was just your standard trial court. Not only that, but it is going to be especially pertinent to the regional office of the USDA that oversees not just Florida, but perhaps some other states in the area. And I think it'll be a wake-up call that everybody's extending their reach, overextending their reach and doing things that are literally unconstitutional. I mean, that's the argument here about the milk restriction, that it violates the First Amendment, which is, it's an important one. It is the first one.
You can make an argument, legal or otherwise, that it is in fact important. And the timeline here, what are we expecting?
All right. The brief was filed this morning, and that's the initial brief in the lawsuit, kind of kicks it off. We expect a response from the agency in a few weeks. And then after that, we get another word in. And then after that, so we're talking 2021, there will be a hearing. And of course, we'll keep you updated. I don't have the schedule yet because it kind of depends on the workload in the court system.
Sure. All right. Well, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. This is definitely one to keep a close eye on, and I'm sure that we'll have more info on this up at pcrm.org. And of course, Mark, we would love to have you back to keep us abreast, my friend.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, sir. From legal to medical. All right, let's do the double dip here and bring in the doctor to continue our discussion. Dr. Vanita Rahman, now from the Barnard Medical Center. And Dr. Rahman, people on both sides of the argument here, I mean, they just have to concede that at the end of the day, the school has the best interest of students in mind here. And the science shows that they are unquestionably on the right track, if for no other reasons than the extraordinarily high rates of lactose intolerance that Mark was just discussing among minorities. And I believe that it was basketball star turned actor John Sally who recently blatantly told the USDA that dairy was racist. So let's talk about lactose intolerance and the other health challenges faced by kids who do drink milk or eat cheese with their school lunches every day. And I want to go back to that big campaign that is so familiar and has been around for decades, that milk does a body good, and it plants that seed that you really need milk to grow up big and strong. So yes or no, do kids really need milk to grow up healthfully?
Sure. When they're first born, they need milk from the mother's breast. But after that, after about the first year of life, they don't necessarily have to have milk. And in fact, when kids consume dairy milk, they do so at the expense of other healthful foods. So little kids will often fill up with glasses of milk or cheese, and then they have no space for the broccoli or spinach or carrots or apples. because milk is so full of fat that it's that filling, and then they don't want to eat the other stuff. So they absolutely don't need it. And it's a big myth, actually, that we need milk to grow healthy bones or to grow tall or to be well. It's been all very cleverly marketed to us, but that's not really what the science shows.
How concerned are you as a doctor that here we are at a point in time, I believe the CDC says 18.5% of all kids in this country are obese. And yet here we are with milk, which is the highest source of saturated fat in a child's diet, and it's being pushed on students every single day. How concerning to you is that as a physician?
Oh, it's very concerning, Chuck, because we're seeing this trend where the rates of childhood obesity are rising. And in parallel with that, rates of childhood disease that were once seen in middle-aged adults, like diabetes and high cholesterol levels and high blood pressure, it's all increasing. And, not just that, with time, kids who are carrying extra weight are more likely to develop osteoarthritis, sort of the wear and tear arthritis that would normally come in the Middle Ages or later, but we're going to start seeing that earlier. So it's all related in our health. And we really need to educate our families, our kids, to really avoid dairy and stick with much healthier options that are out there.
Well, you say arthritis at younger ages. How young are we talking here?
Well, we don't know. We'll have to see. But I know it's not uncommon in my practice that I will often see people in their 20s who have early osteoarthritis. So we know that, this disease didn't start in the 20s. It starts very early on and it just progresses. Osteoarthritis, for our viewers, is sort of a wear and tear arthritis that develops in all our joints. And one of the biggest risk factor is body weight. So the more weight we carry, the more stress we're putting on our joints, especially those large weight-bearing joints in our legs, like the knees or hips. And we will see that we used to see this in middle-aged or older adults. Now we see it in younger adults. And, I fear that if childhood obesity continues to rise, we may start seeing it in children as well. So it really is something that we need to be vigilant about.
Let's talk about an aspect of dairy that often goes overlooked, and that is sodium. I remember having high blood pressure growing up, and it certainly wasn't just because of dairy, but it's a big time contributing factor. That when people think about milk, I can't imagine that they think about the levels of sodium in there. But what is the connection? How much sodium are we actually talking about?
Yeah, so the sodium really comes in from the cheese. So the way cheese is made, it's highly processed and it's very high in sodium. And what do kids love? They love pizza. They love putting cheese on their pasta. They love putting cheese on their tacos. They eat it on a lot of different foods. And that sodium load is really adding up. And we know that this will contribute to high blood pressure rates in children too, just like it does in adults. And at the same time, when kids are filling up with cheese, they're not eating those potassium-rich foods like fruits and vegetables that help reduce our blood pressure. So it's sort of a double whammy, a high sodium food and then a low potassium diet, and kids are more prone to high blood pressure.
Let me ask you, I know back when, again, when I was growing up, I can only draw this off of my own experience, but before football games, the team would get together and we would eat pizza that afternoon, and then we would kick off the game at night. And I always thought, man, I was like, I'm feeling a little bit sluggish to be out here banging heads. And it's obviously loaded in fat, very much high in dairy. How detrimental do you think that pregame meal is that was so dairy rich to our performance? And I want your answer, and then I'll tell you how many games we won.
Well, I think, research suggests that dairy is inflammation provoking in the body. So dairy consumption is associated with higher incidence of asthma or allergies. And we know that when people reduce dairy from their diet, their inflammation goes down in the body. So if we're talking about athletic performance, something that can impede athletic performance is inflammation in the joints. So if we're eating this dairy-rich meal, the joints are much more likely to get inflamed or irritated or fatigued than if we didn't. And we see this in people who stop dairy consumption. Even before they lose the weight, their joints start to feel so much better.
All right. And the answer to the number of games, 4 years in high school when I was there, 1 win. So, Yay, pizza. But I'm sure there were other mitigating factors as well. But here's seriously a big one. All jokes aside, right? Everybody is very self-conscious as a teenager. You want to look your best, you want to feel your best. But so many students struggle with acne, and dairy is a big time contributor for that. Talk to us about that connection.
Yeah, so we know that diets that are high in dairy do contribute to acne. Acne is this, we often think of acne as an inevitable part of adolescence, that it's just normal. But the truth is, in many societies where people eat a mostly plant-based diets, acne is not a part of adolescence. And dairy contains hormones, it's high in fat, and all of this contributes to the development of acne. And we know that children, will start to develop acne at a young age, and it can be a huge deal. Everybody wants to have clear, beautiful skin, and children will be prescribed medications that do or don't work very well. So it's really best if we could just clean up their diet, because not only are we helping their long-term health, we're helping their skin look great in the short term too, which can be such a big motivation factor for a teen.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you feel better, just all the way around. I would imagine you would even have an improved academic performance just because you're so confident in yourself. You like what you see in that mirror. Nina and Randa Nelson have been on the show. These are twin sisters out in California who wrote a book called The Skin Diet. And I mean, just unbelievable the transformation that they had with their complexions. I want to wrap things up here, Dr. Rahman, by asking you about some milk alternatives. We had someone in the chat room yesterday asking about soy milk for kids and whether that was a healthy alternative. So what is your take on milk alternatives?
Yeah, so first of all, kids don't need to have milk. Okay, so let's be clear about that. After a certain age, they don't need milk, and it's really used for cereals or for puddings or for cooking. So it's an ingredient that we use. But so kids will often like cereal or oatmeal, and they may want some milk. So there's some great alternatives out there. Soy milk is a great one, almond milk, but now we have a whole slew of them: flax milk, hemp milk. And so what I recommend is really experiment with your kid. Take them to the grocery store, have them look at the non-dairy milk aisle. It's huge now. Have them pick one that they like, try it and experiment. And everyone will have their own favorite, but soy and almond are easy to find. They're both healthy. And if you have boys, you do not have to worry about the phytoestrogens in soy milk, which sometimes parents worry about that causing breast development or gynecomastia. We don't have any evidence that happens. So enjoy whatever milk your child likes drinking. That's the one I'd go with.
And what would you say to somebody who has their guardo up about dairy and traditional diets, that standard American diet, and still thinks that, man, we really need this, and that a vegan diet is nutrient deficient? How could you put some of those concerns at ease?
Well, you know what? We have guidelines from the American Dietetics Association telling us that plant-based diets are safe and helpful in all stages of life, including infancy, young childhood, all stages, including older adults, pregnancy, lactation. So, we have enough science showing that these diets are safe, they can be helpful. The big key is to make sure you take a B12 supplement and give that to your child as well, even young children. And then work with your pediatrician and see if they have any specific concerns. But we know that it's safe across all stages of life.
All right. Don't forget, you can schedule an appointment to visit with Dr. Rahman at the Barnard Medical Center by visiting barnardmedical.org or by calling 202-527-7500. Telemedicine appointments are available. Insurance is accepted. The process is simple. It's quick. It's easy. You don't even have to leave the comfort of your own home. barnardmedical.org or 202-527-7500. Time now to open up the doctor's mailbag. Dr. Rahman, final bit of business with you here today. It's a great question. Betty is watching us on YouTube, and she wants to know whether low-fat dairy can help with weight loss. She says that my family, they are just cheese-aholics. So I know this is a difficult one. She's asking a pertinent question. Low-fat dairy, weight loss, what say you?
Yeah, so it's just important to understand dairy products are naturally high in fat. So dairy milk is about 50% fat. And when the whole milk says 4% fat, that doesn't refer to the percentage of calories that are from fat, which are actually 50%. So as we reduce the fat content, we are reducing the caloric density. But at the same time, dairy products, even if they're low in fat, have several problems with them. They have no fiber, which is so important for our gut microbes and our gut health, important for relieving constipation, which happens across all stages of life. So really important to keep that in mind. The other is that milk tends to provoke inflammation in the body, whether it's acne or joint pain or other problems that can happen. So it's still important to avoid dairy for that reason, so that we don't cause inflammation. And lastly, if we are consuming milk, whether it's low fat or not, we are not consuming other healthier plant-based foods, which provide us a lot more nutrients, a lot more fiber, and are much healthier for us long term. Because milk is filling, and then once we're full with milk, we don't really feel like eating those fruits and vegetables.
All right, Dr. Rahman, appreciate your time. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, Chuck.
All right. If we didn't get to your question today, have no fear. We will save it and do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. That includes you, Lori. I see your question there. I promise you I will get you an answer tomorrow when Dr. Barnard and Dr. Loomis join us. That is a fantastic question that you're asking about pediatricians. All right. Now, you know that Dotsie Bausch and Alexandra Paul, you know them from the Switch for Good campaign. They are all over this dairy and health connection. As a matter of fact, that group, Switch for Good, recently released a major scientific report on cow's milk, its health and athletic performance. And something else to keep in mind for young athletes to take their game to the next level. We just joked about pizza before the football games for me. Well, this scientific report takes it much deeper, not just for student athletes, but for everyone who even just jumps on a treadmill or goes for a walk after work. This is such a great report. It's 45 pages of information compiled to make really the first scientific report of its kind. And they call this the Dairy Does a Body Bad report. And you can head over to switchforgood.org to pick up your copy absolutely free at switchforgood.org. All right, now let's switch gears here for a second. And I want to remind you that it is still October, and that means that it is not too late to take part in our Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign. All this month, we've been asking you to join with us, take part in those 4 steps that we have identified to lower your risk of breast cancer. You see them on the screen right there. It is not asking too much to do these and take charge of your health. Don't be one of the 8 women who will be diagnosed with breast cancer during their lifetime. Let's beatbreastcancer.org. Go ahead and visit that. And by the way, when you take that pledge, you also can enter to win one of the great grand prize packs that have been provided by our sponsors. You see those on the screen right there. Amazing sponsors like Vistro. I want to say a big thank you to them for supporting the campaign this year as well. All right, now coming up on the show tomorrow, it is a doctor's mailbag blowout to end the week. You just heard me allude to it. Doctors Neil Barnard and Jim Loomis will be here to answer all of your questions. When we open up the doctor's mailbag in a big way, we're going to be devoting the entire show to getting to the bottom of your questions. If you have anything on your mind related to health, nutrition, diets, food, whatever the case may be, something that you want to ask Doctors Barnard or Loomis, go ahead and post that in the comments section now, the chat box, or you can tweet them to us at Chuck Carroll WLC or at PCRM. Just make sure that when you send that, you use the hashtag ExamRoomLive. That is all the time that we have for today's show, though. I want to say thank you to my crew behind the scenes that makes the magic happen, bearing with us through the technical difficulties at the top of the show. Also want to say thank you to the plant-based Perry Mason, attorney Mark Kennedy for joining us, as well as Dr. Vanita Rahman. And to you, my exam roomie, thank you so much as well for raising your nutrition IQ right along with us. On behalf of everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. And until then, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.